Between the shores of occupied China and the island of Formosa, submarine commander Dick O'Kane attacks 5 Japanese ships, sinking 2. He drops back to prepare a final assault.
This last torpedo, this is all that stands between Dick O'Kane and another successful patrol. All he has to do is fire this last shot.
O'Kane and the crew of the USS Tang
New setup. Get ready.
have executed some of the most daring attacks against the Japanese in the Second World War.
Fire.
Until their luck and a torpedo take a dramatic turn.
Captain Rabbit. All ahead emergency.
In World War II, subsea weapon allows warriors to fight from beneath the waves with cunning, force, and tenacity. Their enemies strike back. Revolutionary, but still sometimes primitive. It's a desperate bid to change the course of war. Their stories are legend. June 1944. Off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, an American submarine discovers a convoy of 6 ships, guarded by 16 heavily armed escort vessels.
O'Kane is there, and he's trying to figure out how best to attack. And he has this idea. He says, why not come from the rear? Because lookouts inherently never look behind them.
Falling back, Commander Dick O'Kane discovers that only 2 destroyers protect the end of the convoy. He must sneak past to sink the freighters.
O'Kane really falls back on human nature, gambling on the fact that most lookouts, like humans walking down the street, are going to be looking where they're going, not where they've been.
Constant bearing.
He sets up what he thinks is the perfect shot.
Set. Fire.
He fires a spread of 6 torpedoes. He sees the detonations, and it lights up the night sky.
But USS Tang must now escape the convoy. They are surrounded by enemy ships.
Once those explosions go off, that it's going to draw all the attention of the Japanese escorts to those wounded ships. In that chaos, he'll be able to slide out, and it's what he does. Kane thinks he's successfully sunk 2 ships. Post-war records reveal that he, in fact, actually sank 4 ships. This becomes the most successful American attack in the Pacific during World War II.
By 1944, the U.S. has been fighting Japan for over 2 years. And subs have been one of their most successful weapons. Tang's commander, Dick O'Kane, came of age on another sub, USS Wahoo, under legendary skipper Dudley "Mush" Morton.
Mush Morton takes command of the Wahoo at the start of its 3rd patrol, and Dick O'Kane is his executive officer. These guys are really great friends. They really see combat in a real eye-to-eye kind of way. Dick O'Kane is equally as aggressive as Mush Morton. And so they almost form a perfect fighting team.
Morton gives Tang's skipper his early edge.
He was trained basically by Morton. And the interesting thing about the training was that normally the submarine commander is the one who looks through the periscope, figures out what's going on, and does the rest. Morton prefers to do the plotting and figure out what the situation is. He likes his executive officer, in this case O'Kane, to do the work with the periscope. That prepares him for being a submarine commander. He's very aggressive. He's very good at it.
After 5 patrols on Wahoo, O'Kane remains ashore to take command of newly commissioned Tang. The promotion probably saves his life. 3 months after O'Kane was reassigned, Morton and Wahoo were declared overdue and presumed lost. Now in command of his own crew, O'Kane is determined they will not share his mentor's fate. He puts his new submarine and its crew to a perilous test.
The best tactical thing for a submarine is to go deep, is to get away from the enemy. And so you really want to increase the depth, because that's really your only natural advantage.
USS Tang is an American Vallejo-class submarine. Made of high tensile steel, about 20% thicker than its predecessors. It's engineered to withstand more pressure than any hull before it.
The Vallejo-class submarine was without a doubt the most state-of-the-art submarine that the United States had in its arsenal. As the Japanese anti-submarine technology became more aggressive, the ability for American submarines to be able to escape became paramount.
The U.S. Navy certifies Tang to dive to 400 feet, nearly 100 feet deeper than previous subclasses. But O'Kane wants to see how far he can safely go. The information could be crucial when they come under attack. Some of the delicate equipment does not hold up to crushing ocean pressures. As he pushes the sub 200 feet deeper than it is rated for.
All clear, surface to bow. Aye, sir. Surface, surface, surface.
But Tang's test dive proves the sub can survive at 612 feet. As enemy forces mobilize, O'Kane will need all the help he can get. The Japanese finally acknowledge the threat posed by American submarines to their war effort and establish the Grand Escort Fleet, which grows to 60 vessels.
The Grand Escort Fleet is created to protect Japanese shipping. They would assign a number of ships, usually about 3 or 4, to escort maybe about 12 merchant marine ships, and then escort them through.
Some escorts carry up to 300 depth charges, underwater bombs rigged to detonate at specific depths. The goal is to compromise the submarine's hull. By August of 1944, fewer merchant ships sail from the Empire's outposts. USS Tang is sent into Japanese home waters to search for targets.
Give me a new bearing.
Bearing is now 270, Captain.
Against falling odds, O'Kane locates 2 freighters.
Fire 2-5.
Ignoring a small escort that charges to attack.
That's it. Take her deep.
O'Kane orders a dive to avoid the counter barrage. But the waters are very shallow, less than 200 feet, well within the range of depth charges.
On its 4th patrol off of Honshu, Dick O'Kane experiences the worst depth charge attack he's had in 10 patrols on board submarines.
After the first salvo rattles the submarine, the gunboat completes 4 more passes, releasing more bombs each time.
Lights shatter, gauges are busted. Sailors are knocked off their feet during this attack. It's worse than being on a battlefield in a lot of cases because you're in a tight, confined space. You can't see what's coming at you. You can only hear it, and you can only feel it as it's shaking the boat. When a submarine is lost, it's typically lost with everyone on board. And when you're lost underwater, you know, your chances of survival are so limited.
O'Kane and his men know there's only been one case where a sub-crew has been rescued. In 1939, 33 sailors were recovered with a diving chamber after the USS Squalus sank during a test dive in the Atlantic. The submarine's location near American shores made the recovery possible. 5 years later, and thousands of miles away, O'Kane orders left full rudder and risks full speed toward the open ocean, worried his submarine can't take much more. "38 minutes after the gunboat charges, the enemy loses contact with the sub, and Tang makes an escape. The prolonged attack rattles the crew.
O'Kane and his executive officer, Murray Frazee, they're sitting in the wardroom. Frazee looks over at O'Kane and he tips his hand back like it's a glass, and that's his signal that maybe it's time to break out the depth charge medicine. Depth charge medicine is essentially, it's brandy. It was a way to calm the nerves of the sailors. You know, after you go through a really scary depth charge attack, sometimes a shot of alcohol would be just the thing to sort of take the edge off of a long day.
2 weeks later, O'Kane returns to base. Through 4 patrols, Tang's crew averages a sinking every 11 days. Twice the kill rate of any other U.S. submarine.
In 4 patrols, Dick O'Kane has already sunk 17 ships for 72,000 tons. He's hungry for more action.
USS Tang is under the command of Admiral Charles Lockwood, mastermind of Pearl Harbor's submarines.
O'Kane returns from his 4th patrol, and he goes to see Admiral Lockwood. And Admiral Lockwood wants to go ahead and send him right back out as soon as possible. He needs to have his best skipper in position to help.
Lockwood faces a bold directive. American forces led by General MacArthur rally to charge the Philippines. If they succeed, it will put Allied warplanes within striking distance of Japan.
MacArthur is very hot to attack the Philippines. If we held the Philippines, the Japanese couldn't be safe. And by that time, the Japanese realized that unless they stop us, the next stop is Japan.
Lockwood has orders to sink enemy ships attempting to reinforce the Japanese garrisons. A key supply route from Japan to the Philippines is the Formosa Strait. Both shores of the pass are occupied by the Japanese.
The Formosa Straits is one of the safest passages the Japanese merchant marine could take. It was close enough to the shores. They were protected on both sides by land-based aircraft, and so it was a reasonably safe, or probably the safest route that you could take.
Lockwood turns to his submarine ace to cut off this critical pass. Tang's 5th patrol will take the crew to the Formosa Strait, but before they can leave, they must resupply. It proves surprisingly difficult, however, to source torpedoes. The Mark 14 torpedoes used earlier in the war proved faulty. The wakeless Mark 18 torpedo aims to replace the defective Mark 14.
A Mark 14 is a steam torpedo. Steam means that it leaves a trail of bubbles. That means that if it's coming at you, there's a fair chance that you'll see something coming. An electric torpedo doesn't leave any bubbles. So the Germans introduced electric torpedoes for that reason. We recover some. We basically copy it with American features. That's a Mark 18. And the idea is they won't see it coming, so it'll work better.
On September 24th, 1944, Tang departs for Formosa with a complement of America's newest torpedoes. Mark 18s, initially allocated to a dry dock submarine.
American manufacturers were struggling to keep up, and so there was a shortage. So O'Kane has to ultimately scavenge a load of torpedoes from the submarine Tambor.
O'Kane and his men have been out on patrol at double the expected rate. In exchange, O'Kane negotiates a break for his overworked crew and an upgrade for Tang at the end of this mission. Some 1,500 miles into the journey, typhoon season in the Pacific slows Tang's progress.
As the Tang is heading toward the Formosa Strait, it hits these high swells that develop into this raging storm. Waves crashing against the boat. The Tang is tossing back and forth.
O'Kane tours to batten down the ship. The situation takes an alarming turn.
O'Kane is doing an inspection, and he steps into an open hatch in the forward engine room, and he falls, and his foot snags on the bottom rung of the ladder. He's broken several bones in his foot. So O'Kane is then having to command the ship from his back in his bunk.
October 4th. As O'Kane relies on his crew to battle the erratic weather that's lasted for days. During a lull in the storming seas, an intercepted Japanese message drags the skipper from his quarters. The code break is level ultra.
There's several different kinds of code breaking that happened in World War II. Ultra is basically used for breaking military codes. Much of the Allied code breaking in World War II is joint. There are Americans at Bletchley Park, there are Americans with Australians in Melbourne. There are a lot of those units that work together. And that gives us a fair amount of insight into the timing of Japanese operations.
Skippers like O'Kane use this intelligence to pinpoint the location of enemy ships.
Based on intelligence, these submarines were literally being directed right on the point where they expected to have major Japanese naval units or convoys passing.
The Ultra transmission reveals the suspected location of a Japanese weather ship.
Weather ships make a very big difference. If the other side doesn't have access to weather information and you do, you'll do a whole lot better.
The coordinates are within reach, but the stormy weather compromises O'Kane's attack plan. The increasingly violent sea makes it difficult as he tries to hunt the Japanese weather ship.
Typically in these kinds of situations, a submarine skipper would take the boat deep and just ride it out deep underwater.
But Tang's commander refuses to let a shot at the enemy slip away. They surface so lookouts can brave the bridge to search through the rain.
It's very dangerous for these sailors to be out topside during a raging storm like this. They can get battered around, they can be washed overboard. O'Kane's in a tough spot because on the one hand, he has to get into position. On the other hand, he has run the risk of losing his boat if he's not careful.
Like O'Kane, the weather is unrelenting. Around 3:30 a.m., violent winds force lookouts to abandon the bridge. Tang is in the clutches of a typhoon.
At its peak, the waves were from trough to crest were 95 feet. Many of the men on board the Tang were convinced they were done for.
The sea batters Tang's port side, tilting O'Kane's submarine starboard.
At one point, he looks over at the inclinometer, and he sees it's got a 70-degree list. And he says, is she ever going to come back? And his executive officer says, you know, sometimes they don't.
A powerful storm threatens America's top World War II submarine. If Commander O'Kane attempts to dive now to escape the weather, the waves could capsize USS Tang.
So he has to ride on the surface. He has to just push through this storm, and that's what he does. When the storm finally ended, the crew was just hit by immense relief. And after surviving this, what could be worse?
The Japanese weather ship, if it was ever there, is gone. Blown off course, O'Kane and his crew set a westerly heading for Japanese-controlled Formosa, where Allied forces mobilize a critical blitz. They attack key airfields, destroying hundreds of enemy planes, to cripple Japan's ability to repel MacArthur's assault on the Philippines. The Japanese fight back, damaging 2 aircraft carriers, whose crews are among the first to ever witness a kamikaze attack. USS Tang has arrived amidst the chaos to join the fight. O'Kane's mission is to sink transport ships resupplying Japanese forces in the Philippines.
Skippers like Dick O'Kane, they know what their job is. They know that their success is going to be gauged on how many Japanese ships they've sunk, on how much Japanese tonnage they've put on the bottom of the seafloor. So they leave with 24 torpedoes, and they want to come back empty-handed. They want to have fired them all.
On October 23, 1944, Tang's crew finally spots a chance to strike.
The Tang's radar men pick up a whole mess of blips, so many that they think they're actually looking at an island chain, until they check the charts and they realize there are no islands in the same position. So Kane's excited. He's thrilled at this point. He's got what turns out to be a 4-ship convoy led by 2 destroyers.
The convoy steams to bomb-ravaged Formosa, known today as Taiwan.
Commander, take a look at this.
One of the ships is a troop transport that carries enemy reinforcements.
The target is a freighter, you're cutting off raw materials. If it's a transport, you're cutting off troops. And if you believe that the supply of troops isn't endless, anything that can kill the troops en route helps.
Tang's crew readies for an attack.
Sailors man their battle station.
O'Kane must get Tang past the screen of escorts.
Constant bearing mark.
He's studying this and trying to determine what's the best way to attack. And he sees his moment of opportunity when one of the destroyers pulls out of formation and begins a big wide circle around the convoy, checking up and making sure all the ships are in line.
The timing is perfect.
O'Kane then moves into that destroyer's position. And he knows that on a radar for the other Japanese ships, they're going to look and they're going to see what to them is just an escort. And so he's going to blend right in. He's going to become part of the Japanese convoy.
At nighttime on radar, the submarine looks like a destroyer. O'Kane continues the deception.
He just slowly pulls out to the side, mimicking the movements of the Japanese escort. And then he allows the other ships to slowly overtake him. At that point, he can then turn into position. and he has the broadside of all these ships, all of them targets that he can then shoot at.
Let's get those diggers rigged, Mom. We don't got time. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Constant bearing.
O'Kane takes aim at the cargo ships and the convoy as they pass. Some at Tang's bow, another on its stern.
Mark. Set. Fire.
Fires 3 electric torpedoes. Now these are weightless so that they can't see him coming toward them.
2 ready.
Fire.
Each time he fires, you can feel the jolt, the shudder of the submarine as the compressed air pushes these torpedoes out. And then he waits less than a minute or so, and then the explosions light up the night sky.
O'Kane's bold attack quickly sinks 2 Japanese ships. But the ambush reveals Tang's presence.
And at that point, actually, one of the ships turns and sees the Tang, and he comes in to try and ram O'Kane.
Radar, give me a reading.
The convoy's transport is less than 30 seconds away from smashing into Tang's hull. There's no time to dive.
He's boxed in by these burning ships, and he can't escape, he can't dive. He orders left full rudder and emergency speed, and he actually goes right down the side of this Japanese ship.
O'Kane avoids a collision with the transport, but a 4th cargo ship from the convoy steams in for the kill.
These 2 ships, however, are on their own collision course, and O'Kane sees an opportunity.
Tang's commander maneuvers carefully.
He sets up a shot, and he fires at the spot where the 2 ships are going to collide. So into that mix of these 2 colliding ships go Tang's torpedoes. He's created all this carnage out there. These ships have collided, they've exploded. And so against the glow of these burning ships, he can see the destruction that the Tang has caused. At that point, he decides, my work here is done, and he slips back out to sea.
As daylight breaks, Japanese patrol units hunt the submarine.
Give me a new bearing.
Bearing 272.
USS Tang launched the assault along a main shipping route through the Formosa Strait. O'Kane believes the Japanese will reroute their convoys closer to the Chinese coast in a bid to deter the submarine. The shallower water erodes Tang's deep diving advantage and leaves it more vulnerable to depth charges. It's a risk Tang's skipper is driven to take.
Aye, sir. Surface, surface, surface.
If you're a smart, aggressive guy, you can get real results. But that's also incredibly dangerous. Some of the most successful commanders get killed pushing it too hard.
On October 24th, the Tang's radarmen pick up another convoy. And this is actually a 12-ship convoy, and it's departed Sasebo in Japan. And it's guarded by 5 escorts. And it's strung out in one really long column.
If the convoy is weakly protected, it becomes a tasty meal rather than a dangerous place.
Stringing out the formation leaves some of the merchant ships unscreened.
O'Kane wonders, why would the convoy commander do this? Why wouldn't he group them all together and surround them and keep them safer? But he surmises that the convoy commander has strung them out so much so that if they're attacked by American submarines, and they'll have enough space and distance that they can separate, they can get out of the way.
O'Kane has 11 Mark 18 torpedoes left. He must fire as many as he can before his targets scatter.
And so O'Kane then has to decide, how is he going to attack?
All ahead, 2/3.
O'Kane orders Tang to slink between the convoy's 2 columns.
He's getting in close on this convoy when the searchlights illuminate, and the Tang gets spotted.
The crew races to attack the cargo ships before their escorts mobilize.
Get ready!
He sets a sight on one, he fires.
Fire!
5 on the way.
He moves on to the next, fires again and again.
O'Kane targets 5 ships before a destroyer closes in.
At that point, he clears out. He pulls back, he's only got 2 torpedoes left.
One of the ships they've hit has not sunk.
It's riding low in the water, but it's not actually sinking. And he wonders, are those crews below deck doing damage control duties? Is it possible that they're going to save the ship?
Escorts protect the damaged ship's seaside. O'Kane decides to creep around and attack from closer to the shore.
It's time to regroup, get a cup of coffee, and more importantly, reload those last couple of torpedoes. And then it's time to return to the fight.
The words of his mentor drive O'Kane back into the fray.
It's just as much Morton had told him. Tenacity, Dick. You stick with them till they're on the bottom.
At 2:30 a.m., Tang circles in for the kill. The submarine advances at 2/3 speed.
Set up! Get ready!
9, stand by.
Fire!
Tang fires its 23rd Mark 18 torpedo. Crew's ready for the 24th.
This last torpedo, this is all that stands between Dick O'Kane and another successful patrol. He's going to head all the way back to San Francisco, the promise of days off, several months in California, a real break from the war for his men. All he has to do is fire this last shot.
Fire!
And fired electrically.
The final warhead fires from Tang's bow. Cheer spreads through the ship.
Throughout the submarine, men relax. One of the men shouts, "Let's head for the barn." There's no more torpedoes to fire. The patrol is done.
But seconds later, something goes wrong.
Dick O'Kane is up on the bridge at this point,
We have an erratic!
and he sees almost immediately that he's got a problem, a major problem. The torpedo is running erratically.
Tang's last torpedo makes what's called a circular run, which is what it sounds like. It comes back at her.
A vertical rudder steers the 3,154-pound torpedo. It's not running the right way.
If the rudder on the torpedo locked, instead of going onto the new course and staying there, it would just keep turning.
Radar, give me a reading!
570 pounds of explosives race faster than the sub can travel.
You can see the phosphorescence trailing behind it, kind of like the tail of a comet, and so he can chart its course as it's coming in. He's watching with horror as this errant torpedo is boomeranging back toward him.
The torpedo is on a crash course with Tang's port side.
The submarine is the length of a football field, and he has only about 10 seconds to try and fishtail his submarine out of the way of this torpedo.
Tang and similar submarines were so large, they couldn't maneuver as well as, say, a smaller sub might have.
All ahead emergency!
So he immediately orders emergency speed and left full rudder to try and swing it around.
Hold on, hold on!
20 seconds after Tang's final Mark 18 launched, the warhead strikes the submarine, which fired it.
The torpedo comes and it slams into the stern of the Tang, and it blows a huge hole in it and immediately starts flooding this aft compartment. All those men in there are either killed in the explosion or they drown.
The rest of Tang's crew is thrown into chaos.
The explosion is so horrific on board that it literally raises up the deck plates, ruptures piping, and it shatters equipment and machinery. Their training kicks in like that, and they begin to seal those watertight compartment doors to help isolate the flooding. Sailors throughout the boat who just seconds earlier had been celebrating this return to San Francisco are now faced with this stunning horror as water's beginning to flood inside of the submarine.
Topside, Tang's skipper faces a dark sea.
They can see the water racing up. They also can see this huge cloud up above the Tang, and it's that telltale symbol of a destroyed ship that they had seen so often over their own victims.
As Tang sinks, O'Kane and the lookouts are swept from the bridge.
The boat, like a giant pendulum, swings down to the bottom until it rests on the muddy bottom of the Formosa Strait.
The surviving crew have one chance at life. An exit hatch in the torpedo room at the bow of the submarine.
That escape chamber is the only thing that stands between these men and death. The bow, which is still filled with air, is actually jutting out of the waves, sort of like a knife blade, if you will, coming up.
But with Japanese escorts on the hunt, the exposed section makes them vulnerable.
They were worried that there's still Japanese destroyers out there and their escorts. And they know that the bow of a submarine is an easy target. And so if they don't level it and hide, then the Japanese may come in, know exactly where they are, and destroy the Tang completely.
The men choose to sink their damaged submarine to conceal it, while they prepare to escape.
They decide to level the boat, to release all the air from the forward ballast tanks, and to let the bow of the Tang come down and rest on the bottom. They release the air, and the Tang dives for a final time. At this point, these men who are scattered throughout the submarine have to make this march forward to the forward torpedo rim where the escape chamber is. And it's a journey through a destroyed submarine. There's sparks. Some of the men are trying to destroy code books. Some of these men had broken legs, broken arms. Their heads had hit, corners of equipment, and it cut them open. And so they've got to move these injured men all the way forward.
An hour after Tang sinks, the last of its crew reaches the bow.
And then they get to the forward torpedo room. Several dozen men. They ultimately all crowd inside and they seal that door. And inside that forward torpedo room is the escape chamber.
The entire submarine lies 180 feet below the surface. The crew will use a special issue breathing aid to give them a chance to survive the ascent. A Momsen lung, a canister of soda lime captures carbon dioxide, so air can be recycled and breathed again. It's an experimental device designed to increase the odds of survival.
And they're supposed to pause after so many feet to go up and sort of equalize, to breathe in, breathe out, and sort of equalize the air in their lungs. In theory, it seems like a very simple concept. But typically, when a submarine was lost, all hands were lost with it. It was almost an all or nothing. In very few cases were there any survivors.
As Tang's crew prepares to brave the ocean, another attack stops them short.
As these men are there, crowded inside the forward compartment, terrified about how they're going to make it 180 feet up to the surface, the Japanese are coming over and they're dropping depth charges. So here they are stuck on the bottom, and their boat's still being rattled.
helpless men endure a final depth charge attack before the sea falls silent.
The conditions at this point in the forward torpedo room of the Tang are awful. The battery compartments are on fire. It's hazy at this point. The air pressure is rising and the heat and humidity are rising. All of these things combine to sap the energy from these men who are facing this life or death struggle as to how to get off of the sunken boat.
13 men muster the strength to attempt an escape.
It's a really daunting task because at 180 feet, it's the equivalent of an 18-story building.
Others are unwilling or unable.
And so many more finally decide to give up. They lay on their bunks. They've surrendered to their fate.
At 8 a.m., Tang's escape hatch closes for the last time.
When they first step out, it's very dark. You can't see anything. And the farther they go up toward the surface, the water around them begins to lighten.
Only 5 of the 13 men survive the ascent.
Even those who escape and make it all the way to the surface aren't necessarily guaranteed to survive. In fact, for some of those men, they watch others come up who are vomiting, who blood is coming out of their noses, who are so exhausted and so sick at this point that they ultimately drown just a few feet away from their friends, their bodies carried out by the tide.
The shallower seas where Tang attacked may have saved their lives. Even slightly deeper water might have proved unsurvivable. 4 others from Tang's bridge and conning tower also make it through the night. All are taken prisoner by the Japanese. One of them is Tang's legendary skipper, Richard O'Kane.
The Japanese began to punch them, slap them, put out cigarettes on their skin. And O'Kane looks and he realizes that a lot of the people who are inflicting this pain are covered in bandages and this white salve, this medicinal salve. And he realizes that the people who are now punishing him are the survivors of the boats that he just sank the night before. And he later says, I could take it better after learning that these were the blows coming from victims of what we had done the night before.
Tang survivors spend the rest of the war in Japanese prisoner of war camps. O'Kane lives to be 83. He goes down in history as the most successful skipper of an American submarine.
O'Kane's legacy really comes down to tactics and daring. His expertise and what he was best suited for really was fighting. That's what Dick O'Kane was at the end of the day. He was a fighter.
Because USS Tang only ever had one commanding officer, Richard O'Kane, it's hard to separate the submarine from the commander. Their legacy is that of one of the most successful fighting submarines of the Second World War.
Because it was held in such high regard, the first post-war class of American subs was named after USS Tang. A lasting tribute to the man and the submarine.